It's Sunday, October 26, 2025. I got a little bit of flack from the cliffhanger that I left you with last week, but I apologize, but I'm here to continue on with the project. So last week, of course, I managed to finish all of the sides, complete with rabbets and grooves. And this week, I'm going to start with the plywood. So I brought in 4 sheets of 3/4 plywood and 4 sheets of 3/8 plywood. The 3/8 plywood will go under the polystyrene and the 3/4 will go on top. There's a little bit of a wrinkle, but it's a good wrinkle because it's going to solve a problem I didn't know I had. Now I'll use my migratory cover here as an example. So I use my migratory cover on my hives, and this one is sized for the wooden boxes with the feed hole plug, and then I can put my pail. As you can see, the big circle on here, I can put the pail overhead and the bees can feed through the hole. That works great. Now I have a bit of a problem with the poly boxes because, as stated, poly boxes are larger. They're thicker walls, so they're larger overall. So this is what we're looking at here. It's not going to work. So what I have to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to make new covers for the poly boxes. And that's going to solve another issue. I wanted to get 3 inches of polystyrene in the insulated portion of the cover. But I built it for 2.5 for some reason. I think it was a mistake, but I'm going to solve that mistake by adding that extra 1/2 inch here with my standard 1/2 inch shim. Okay, so what's going to happen is this insulated cover is going to sit here, and then I'll put my newly built migratory cover on top of that, and that'll give me 1/2 inch more space for polystyrene to stick up above this. So maybe not exactly what I would have planned, but that's the way it's going to go. Yeah, so you can see that these covers are not long enough and they're not as wide. They would go on the box being not as wide, but they don't cover it by, you know, I don't like having a flat area like that because melting snow and rainwater can go in under the wood. I want to have it cover right to the edge. So those covers are going to be a bit wider, and then what that's going to offer me is in the spring when I want to feed these colonies, I can then take the insulated portion off of there, drop that the new migratory cover down onto the poly box, and feed the colony. There will be a foamy then added under the wooden cover just for a little bit of insulation. It doesn't offer tons of insulation, but it just keeps the heat from the cluster off of the cold plywood. So that's what's going on. And to do that, I need to cut a bunch of plywood. So these poly boxes are 17 3/4 wide, 21 1/8 long. And that's going to be essentially how big the pieces of plywood are. Because I want to do joinery on the end cleats, the plywood will be a little longer than 21 1/8, but I can deal with that. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to take these 3/4 inch sheets of plywood. I'm just going to rip them in 2 at 24 inches, and then they'll just have extra along the side. If you remember the way I build, I'll build in extra width and length when I can, so that at the end of the project I can trim the project, and then all of my joinery and shims and everything will be cut nice and flush with one another, and it makes a really nice finished project with, very little extra effort, to be honest. Just a quick run through the table saw at the end. So I have my fence set at 24 inches. I'm going to run the 3/4 inch through here. The 3/8 is nicer plywood than the 3/4. This 3/4 was this CD that I bought. It's only four. What is it? 4-ply. It's 4-ply plywood. It's really not very great. And if it's going to have issues, generally it's along the edges. So that's why I'm going to cut it in the center so that I can make my project out of the center parts. It's going to be a lot of waste, but this is cheap garbage plywood anyway. I'll never buy it again. I just have to use up what I have on hand. So that's what I'm going to start doing. I'll back up here a bit so you don't get hit by the plywood. lifting those 3/4 inch sheets of plywood is not something you want to do at the end of the day, because you need full thrust in the engines to do that. I used to be able to overhand those on the table saw. I've actually overhanded those onto the roof of my porch. That was 20 years ago. But regardless of that, I got the job done. However, there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of waste. I made a mistake on 2 of them. I cut 2 of them 1/2 inch too short. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7. There's 6 that I don't want to use besides that. So because that equals 8, I can go and get another sheet of plywood and cut that up. And if I don't have any failures on that, then I'll get 8 more. See, this is what's happening to this garbage plywood. The glue is no good, and it just totally delaminates. I mean, this is cross grain, so it's coming apart, but it's the glue that doesn't hold it together. So I don't want those problems going forward with my cover, so I have to cut that off. And if that's going to happen, it's usually at the edges, but not always. I mean, this is testament here, because a lot of this split apart kind of in the middle of the sheet. You can see here where they had a problem with the sheet, and they ended up with no veneer in the middle here. So, you know, didn't have anywhere for the glue to adhere. And just lots of problems like that, you know. I could use this, you know, I could put glue in there and whatnot. The dimension isn't going to be stable. Some of them are far worse than others. I think some of this stuff was fire kill, because it's all charred on the inside, and of course if there's char, the glue doesn't stick to char. So that's why it's cheap. And the problem is, it wasn't cheap enough to make up for it. So, you know, if you remember me using this, it was 2 seasons ago. There were a number of places where it delaminated, and I tried to take my glue and get some glue down in it, screw it together, let it dry, and then cut it up. Well, the glue in the center of a sheet takes a long time to set. And what happened was, it was either 2 or 3 times. I cut one of those sheets and it got in the middle, and my saw stop blew the brake. It's a $200 brake. So there's no way I saved any money on this lumber, on this plywood. I really, you know, I took a chance on what it was and what it would do for me, and I regret taking that chance. So I need to go back outside. I'm thankful that I don't believe it's raining right now. It's going to rain starting tomorrow. It's going to rain for a couple of days, so I'll go get another sheet with the tractor, bring it in, and get that cut up. It's Monday, October 27, 2025. Now, I did get all my pieces cut yesterday, all my plywood cut. I was working on yesterday, but then I got waylaid on some other stuff I need to accomplish. So it is now the next day, and I'm this close to being ready to assemble. The things that keep me up at night, and I realize that my short pieces need to have an upper entrance cut into half of them. So I could do that after assembly. I think it's just a little bit quicker to do it here before assembly. I have to make sure that I cut only half of them, and I have to make sure that then I put one of each on each cover. So there's that. So anyway, I've set up my saw here with my dado blade and my miter gauge, and I'll show you what I've got. All right. So what I've done is I've measured out here, center of my front. These upper entrances don't need to be in the center. This is just me overthinking again, and I've got that pretty darn close to center. I decided that I would do a 1-inch wide upper entrance, which I've used in the past. But my dado blade goes to 7/8, so we'll do 7/8. So I've got that centered on 7/8 with my flip stop on my miter gauge here. I'll be using this piece of scrap as a stop block, as a backup piece to eliminate tear out. I could tolerate some tear out on the back. There really wouldn't be a whole lot because we've got this groove here, and the entrance will be really only taking off this bottom strip here. The plywood will be in the groove. So that means that the height of my upper entrance doesn't have to be absolutely critically adjusted, because if I cut it a little too high, I want to make sure I get right through this piece. If I cut it a little bit high, then that's fine. The bottom of the plywood will determine the height of it inside. So really, I'm just gonna raise the saw, and it's actually, I think it's just about perfect now. I can adjust it again later. I will cut these with the groove to the back, because if there is any tear out, I want that to be on the inside. And that's about it. There should really not be any tear out at all, because I've got this backer piece. All right, I'm going to cut a few of these, and then we'll see how they look. Okay, I've got my sacrificial worktop up here, since I haven't seen my workbench in about 3 years. I'm not sure where that went. I just use my table saw. Brings this up a little higher too. The other side of this, I have those blocks of 2x4s screwed to it that make up the jig for positioning the risers for my 2-way and 3-way pallets. So when I flip it over, it's raised up a little bit, which is just fine. So we have a nice piece of plywood here. It's pretty good on one side and less good on the other side. And really, it doesn't matter for this project. This is going to be the piece of plywood. It's not going to see weather. It's going to be wax dipped anyway. So it's just a matter of, how I want it to look. And so I'll put the good side down, because if you can ever see it, that's how you're going to see it. I think the best way for me to go about assembling this is to start with the long side, because the long side is the same length as the plywood is long. And I can feel that I've actually undercut the size of the plywood by a little bit, which is going to be helpful on assembly. It doesn't need to be fiddle string tight in there. See, that's nice and roomy. I've got the groove fairly roomy in there. And because the plywood is always going to be bowed a little bit. And I'll tip the camera up a little so you can see that. And then I can put this on this side. So that's how it's going to go together, just like that. So you're starting to see the finished product now. And that's the back, of course, because there's no entrance. But before I put that in there, I don't need a ton of glue in the grooves. I don't know that I need any glue in the grooves. But I do want glue on the joinery on the ends. It doesn't matter if I get a little bit of glue in the groove. I could put just a smattering. The only thing glue in the groove will help with is moisture. I don't know that I want moisture coming through any cracks. That might not be a big deal, but it's not the purpose of this box. I don't really want moisture collecting in the box, is what I'm thinking. So these, if I glue this surface, all of my glue is going to be here. I won't have any on there. So I want to put a little bit of glue on there. And also on the other end. Now, I may want glue in the groove because here, what I've got here is this piece of wood. You can see that it's not very well supported here. So if I glue it to the plywood, it's going to give it a little bit of strength. So, I can just run a little bead along that. That's easy enough. I can do that on the sides as well. But because I'm not stapling the wood to the sides, I can, take one side, pull the plywood out, and glue that still. So now, because my groove is sloppy, I want to line these up best I can by hand and drive some staples. I think 3 is appropriate there, and 3 on this side. Always want to clean my squeeze out. Okay. So I may have driven that staple. Oh, it's going to come out. So if I do want to put glue in that groove, I can just do likewise right here. Can't really see it. It's hard to do. I just have to squeeze the glue bot and hope there's glue going in it. Okay. We'll get that back in there. There's no doubt going to cause squeeze out. I got that in the other way, so there's glue on this side now. It's not a problem. But now I have to remember this is the entrance side. So I need to put the third part, the front end. Okay. This is not a great glue joint because it's a great big end grain joint, and I find it's nice if you can actually put glue on each surface, and then my finger can push that glue into the grain in the wood and make it adhere better. Wet glue to wet glue is a really nice bond. Wet glue to dry wood is you know, it's going to suck the glue up, and you're not going to be able to maybe get full contact. And again, keep your fingers. These are 1.25" staples. So you want to keep your fingers at least 1.25" away from the end of that stapler. Okay. Okay, so that's the insulated cover with the addition of polystyrene and like I say, Bob's your uncle. So that is one of 36, and we'll just keep going. Sometimes you need your grooves and dados to be tight. You know, if you're making fine furniture, for example, maybe that's what you want. But these definitely not. It's specifically because if that joint is really tight, I have to really bash it in there and squeeze it in there. I could crack this little piece of wood off of there. And that certainly is not what I want to accomplish. Keep losing my glue bot. Put the center one in first so I can hold it with my fingers. And once it's in, then I can let go. And it should stay fairly well located for the other two. I wonder how many I'm going to make with 2 entrances or no entrance at all. Because you know what's going to happen, don't you? you can see how the upper entrance works out. The top of the entrance is right at the bottom of the plywood. I think that'll help with ventilation because the moist air comes up to the cover, and then it won't have any encumbrance to leave the hive. Now, I prefer to have a desiccant, so I prefer to leave this plain, but that wouldn't do the wood any good, and I do want to wax dip them, and there's no way to dip everything but that. I do tip my hives so that the bottom board and the cover won't be level, and the water will run. However, I tip them forward, so the bottom board will shed water forward, but so will this. So water vapor will kind of move to the back, I suppose, but the water droplets might migrate forward. I don't know. Those are all kind of considerations, but there's so many variables in wintering, and there's climate variables, there's environment variables, there's weather variables, there's colony strength variables. And you have to take all of that and build that into the design of the equipment, right? It has to make up for all of those variables. The problem is there's a reason they call them variables. Those variables are not constant, right? I can't predict what the weather is going to be like this winter. Is it going to be, windy or cold or dry or wet, or, I can just look at averages, look at what I would expect to see. And that's why, we all know that, we all say beekeeping is local, and that's very true. And in equipment, there's, it's just as true in equipment design. You can't just use blanket statements in this is the kind of equipment that you should use in every climate. That's not true. That's keeping your head in the sand about all the variables that you can't predict and you can't control. And it's keeping your head in the sand about the variables that you can predict. You can't take what you know about your local climate and just throw that to the wind and use what somebody in a totally different climate zone has vowed that the correct way to do things is. To me, a lot of that's anecdotal. You just talk to the people in your area. You talk to the beekeepers who have, reasonable winter losses that you'll accept, and talk to them and say, what do they do? I've been keeping bees 10 years, and I have a little bit of experience, but I've been talking to a lot of beekeepers who have a lot more wintering experience than I have. And I will not say that I've heeded every piece of information that I've gotten, but I use it. What works for you? Do you run singles or doubles? Use upper entrance or not? Have you experimented with upper entrances or not? Because I would rather use their experience to save me some time and money on my wintering experience. I can do it the hard way. I can close off and not talk to anybody, and I'm a pretty smart guy. I can figure it out probably 60% at least all by myself. But that's expensive and it takes years. You only get one chance every year, right? So I take tidbits from everybody. I take everybody with a grain of salt. Not everybody observes how different things work. Not everybody has knowledge and experience and is able to think in terms of HVAC, if I may put it that way, because that's exactly what we're doing here. We're building a passive HVAC. We're building HVAC infrastructure. The bees are the HVAC engine. But we don't know, we can't rely on what size that engine is. We can't rely on how many BTUs it's going to be capable of, because the colony size, the cluster size, might be a different stage of health, and it might be a different size. Smaller cluster, they might winter just fine. But if I'm setting up a system that relies on a cluster of a certain size in order to have success, maybe that cluster is going to be larger or smaller than I anticipated and therefore not work. So I think that's why wintering is such an art, because you have to build your equipment to certain spec, and there's nothing saying you can't have different types of equipment. Maybe you have different equipment you have for a weaker colony or stronger colony. I have nuke boxes I winter. I have 10 frames that I winter. So that's definitely a difference. And so maybe you do that, but you can't just individualize everything by colony, and you don't even know some of the time what that colony is capable of. And you also don't know what's coming in the winter. Is it going to be super cold? Is it going to be humid or dry? You don't know. So it's a huge guessing game. So this plywood is nice and straight that direction, but it's bowed like crazy this way. So this piece is going to have to straighten it out. That's where it puts stress on that bottom little piece of wood there. And that's chiefly why I'm using glue there, just to support that little piece of wood on the bottom. Okay, let's straighten that out. Oh, it's really bent. I'm gonna staple that so it stays down. Well, that's that for the insulated part, the insulated box. I still have to put the polystyrene in, of course. I think I'm going to go 2 sheets of 1.5 inches to make 3 inches. I could go 2 inch and then 1 inch, but I'll just do 2 sheets of 1.5 inches. But I think I'm just going to go to town now, get some of these 1x8s, because I use those for building the cleats, the end cleats and top cleats on the covers. So I have to build 32 migratory covers now out of this plywood that I cut. And that takes a while. That takes a while because I'll build, the plywood's cut. So I should drill those out for the feed holes. And I need to cut the cleats. I need to mill the cleats, install them, glue them together, screw them, etc., etc. And then I have to cut the 1/2 inch shims for the bottom. I think I'm going to cut those a little bit thicker, maybe 3/8, just to give me lots of room for that polystyrene. You don't want to try and compress that. It doesn't compress. And I may end up actually screwing that cover to the box for the winter, just to make sure everything is nice and tight. So anyway, I think I'm going to end up going to town and hopefully I can get the 1x8s and the polystyrene in one trip, and come back and then resume building. That'll probably use up the rest of my day doing all that, so I might not get back to building until tomorrow. Anyway, thanks for watching this much of it. It's Tuesday, October 28th, 2025. So as I left you last time, I had completed assembly of the bottom portion of this project, and now I'm on to doing the top. Now, fortunately, I've already cut the plywood for the top, but I have to make all the shims and the cleats for the covers. Now, that terminology may or may not mean anything to you, depending on if you've seen me do this before. I've done it many times before on videos, but you may not have seen those. So essentially, a cleat, top cleat or end cleat, is top cleat, end cleat. It's just what I call it. I have to call it something, and then I call the bottom little runner here, I call it a shim. So this is what I'm making, these top cleats and end cleats. These covers are 2-inch wide, 2-inch high, well, 2-inch high here, plus the 3/4 here. And I mostly do that. I determine this one 2-inch by the spacing of the runners on my pallet. I want to keep this as narrow as possible so I can keep the runners pushed out to the front and back as much as possible. So I compromised on 2 inches here. That gives me lots of glue surface. I actually screw these in from the bottom onto there, so those should never come off. I make that one 2 inches only because then I only have to cut one size apart. I have a customer who prefers 2 1/4 on there, which is fine because this is only protrudes down 3/4 of an inch on my boxes. He wants a little bit more, so I cut them 2 1/4 for him. So I'm cutting 2 different size pieces. It's not such a big deal, just 2 different sizes, and then I have to keep them separate, right? And they are separate at some point because they get a rabbet cut in this cleat that fits onto the end of the plywood here. So the covers that I'm building, they're longer overall. So I'm actually making this piece 2 1/4, and then this piece will be 2 1/4 as well. So that's just what I'm working with here. All right, what I've done is I've just taken some scraps that I had here in the shop from previous projects, and I've cut a few of these. I need 128 of these. For 32 covers, I need 128 of these because there's 4 on each, of course. So these are rough size, 18 inches long by 2 1/4 wide, made with 3/4 inch material. So that's a cleat, and I need 104 more of those. Went to the store yesterday after I left you, and I bought 10 pieces. It was actually, I bought 5 because they're 16s, and then I cut them with my little saw to 8 feet. So I have 10 pieces 8 feet long here. I've got spacers in between. I put them here, and I put the ceiling fans on full because it's been raining for days and they were super wet. I'm not sure if they're dry enough, they feel dry to run through my saw stop. So I'm going to be running this with the blade brake deactivated, which, you know, is not my first choice, but I also don't want to run the risk of tripping that $200 brake. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to rip, because I have those, I have to rip 7 of these, and I'm going to rip them all in 2 inch or 2 1/4 inch wide strips, and then I can cross cut them, and I cross cut them about 18 inches overall, so then I have the extra. They're supposed to be finished size of 17 3/4. I have 1/4 of an inch to trim each side. I can trim 1/8, which makes a nice end product. So yeah, again, ripping first is always desirable, not always possible. You know, sometimes material, if it's longer than 8 feet, I can't rip that because the wall of my shop is right there. So often I'll have to break them down on a radial arm saw, then bring them over and rip them. That can run into more waste because you know, if you have knots that are opposing different places and different sides, if you rip it first, you can remove those knots as you go. If you're kind of cut the whole thing cross cut, then you have to just, you know, either accept the knot or you're going to waste more material by getting rid of that knot. So that is what I'm doing, and I'm going to start with these. I'm going to just take a very thin line off of the edge of these just to true it up. Construction lumber is never bang on, right? And some of this stuff is a little bit warped. So I'll just true that up. I get rid of that rounded edge because I don't always want a rounded edge. I do at the end round the edges with my router, but where the pieces meet, I don't want rounded edges there to make a crack. So I've already done test cut, and I have about 3/8 more width than I need, which is perfect because I can take that little bit off of here, and then I have a little sliver at the end, and I get 3 nice square 2 1/4 inch pieces out of that one board. So enough talk, let's get to work. I can employ my feather board here to keep that board nicely against the fence. I'm going to tip it here so that the tip contacts and not the whole thing, because these boards are not always exactly the same width. If I get a wider one and I have all of these fingers engaged, it makes it much harder to push through. So you can't tell from there, but I'm only engaging the last 4 fingers on this board, and that'll make it easier if there's another board that's wider than that. So this feather board won't go back far enough for this first rip cut, as I can demonstrate. You know, it's a 3/4 of an inch too close, so I'll have to take that off. And sometimes I'll cut all of them once, set them aside, and then put the feather board and cut them all again. I'm not even sure right now which one I'll do, but we'll get at this anyway. Next, I need to cross cut these, but I have a problem. My radial arm saw is covered in boxes. So I need to move those. I'm wondering if I should just move them straight into the truck. Okay, this is just more of the same. Just cutting these in about 18-inch lengths, and I'll try to cut around the knots if that's possible. I don't have too much that I can waste. I've got the dado blade set up again. The dado blade is set to 3/4 of an inch wide, and I've test fit it to the plywood, and it slides in there real nice. It's not sloppy, but it's not super tight. There's only 1/4 of an inch here. I'm a little concerned about that being a bit weak, but I've gone 1/4 of an inch from the dado blade with the fence, and I'll also 1/4 of an inch deep. If you ignore the groove that's on the top of this, so ignore this part, that's what that is going to look like. And then the top cleat will be rabbited to fit over this. So I thought it was a good time to try out this new joinery, since these are my covers. If it ends up being too weak, or there being a different problem with it, then it'll only be my equipment that fails, not a customer's. It's definitely more work, because I have to groove or rabbet every one of these, and usually with the other joinery I need to rabbet only half of them. So we'll see how this goes. Since this is the end cleat, I'm going to choose the best material, because being the end cleat, it puts up with a lot of stress. There's nothing to support it below, here. And if something's going to break, it'll break off with the grain. So, I mean, even this piece, I guess that's okay. I can run my, determine where the top is. The bottom's still pretty good. It's got a bit of a knot there, but it's a big tight knot, so they're pretty strong. But I definitely don't want any cracks or anything in the end cleat. The top cleat, it's 100% glue surface and screws, so it's really just there to fill up space and to give a little more support to the end cleat. So I think I'll let this pass and just run that through this way. All right, let's do some of these. I have reset the saw. I had to make the dado blade a little bit wider. It's only about 1/16 of an inch wider, and that's because I need to cut off the end of the board, so it has to be wider than this piece. And then not only that, but I have to put my sacrificial fence on so that it can protrude past the end of the blade. You can see that the fence I've used it enough that it's cut out here. And then I need to run these through this way. So I need a rabbet here that's 3/4 wide and 1/4 of an inch deep. And then the end cleat and the top cleat then come together like this. And if all goes well, that makes a nice, beautiful joint. I can't even feel the joint in there. Or actually, it's on this side. Yeah, it's tight. It's tight. There's always variability, though. Like that side is absolutely flush. There's always variability when you're cutting down on the table like this. The lumber can be a little bit bowed. Maybe, if I push it like this, I won't hold this end down enough to keep it right down on the tabletop. This is a pretty good insert, so it's pretty stable. I don't worry about that too much. So those are the things I'm watching here to make sure I hold it down nice and firmly. All right, a couple sample pieces there that I cut, and now it's just run the remaining 64, and I actually have one spare. So if I come across, I'll run the 64 best, and this is kind of not great, but it'll actually make a pretty good top cleat because, like I say, it's 100% glue surface, and so it's mostly there to take up space. I'm gonna set that one aside for now, and if I find one that's worse than that, then I'll use that. Okay, here we go. It's 9 degrees outside. It's not especially sunny. It's quite overcast. It's been raining for days. It's like a swamp out there. There's a little bit of a breeze, so it's not a lovely day. It's not too bad, but it's not, beautiful. And there's twice I've seen a honeybee fly in here, and I'm 100 yards from the apiary. I can't believe they're actually venturing out like that. But just thought I'd point that out. People ask me sometimes, how cold can it be before honeybees won't fly? There's a lot of variables. It's not just temperature. Anyway, I got my end cleats and top cleats all milled, and the only thing I have to do now is to cut the rip, I should say, the shims, the short shims, the long shims for underneath the cover. So I'm going to do that now. Not very interesting, but that's what I'm doing. I think I have all my parts milled up now and ready to go. Everybody's favorite part is assembly. I put one together just so I didn't look like a fool on camera if it didn't go well. Yeah, it went really well, actually. There was a little bit of a different process for assembly because my joinery was different. And I wanted to comment on some of my parts are very long because I realized when I was cutting these on the radial arm saw that there was not really any point to making that extra cut because I'll be trimming everything at the end anyway. And so that shows up here. You can see that this cover is this big and I've got all this extra material. That's because exactly that. When I broke down the plywood, I just cut it in 24-inch pieces. So these are 24 inches wide, but I don't need them to be, the cover is, what is it? 16 3/4, or it's more than that. I can't remember. It's like 17 3/4 overall width for the cover. And so that's, as you can see that my shim is here. This is waste. So that'll be cut off when I'm all done assembling everything. Hopefully that's tomorrow. Then everything will get trimmed, and then I'll get my router out and do my little roundovers. So I'll bring this closer to the camera and give you a closer look at this joinery. It did go together quite well. You can see this plywood that I'm using. It ends up with some voids in it. There's not much I can do about that. So let's see. I'll show you that joint. It looks pretty good. It is a little bit roomy in there, which is nice. The plywood goes in there nicely, but there's a little bit of a space. But the shim glues to the cleat, and this came together just perfectly, absolutely perfectly here. It's a little confusing to me because my top cleat is now milled exactly the same as my end cleat was milled, because the old end cleat would sit here and the plywood would go into it like that. Well, that's exactly the same thing as what is now running as my top cleat, to mate with the new end cleat, just like that, as I've shown you before. So that's kind of, you know, I wonder if I could assemble this like this and then slide it on the plywood. Maybe I can do that. I don't know if it would buy me anything, but yeah. So, okay, I'll be working at this for a while, assembling, and I'm just about played out. I've been at this about 6 hours now. Today I haven't had a break, I haven't had lunch, I haven't hardly sat down. One difference I've done here is I've made this shim 5/8, just one more eighth of an inch thick. And that's just so that I don't have any interference with the polystyrene. I'm just kind of paranoid about that. So when I put the polystyrene in the lower box and put this on top, I want to make sure it's going to fit nicely and go down over top, and there's going to be enough headroom for it to sit on the bottom box nicely. So that then makes my overhang of my cleat a little bit less, but I don't think that's really an issue at all. Yeah, so okay, that's one down and 31 to go. So I'll show you how I'm doing this for assembly, just the process, so you get an idea of what's going on. I'll just have to set these aside. They take a lot of space, being that I didn't trim them up properly. So with this plywood, there's always a good side and a bad, like a bad edge and a good edge and a good side and a bad side. But sometimes the good side isn't much better than the bad side. But so same thing, start with the good edge toward me and the good side down. This is a 1.5 inch 16 gauge nail that I'm using to nail the end cleats, and I actually nail the top cleats on too. So this, I'm just going to put a bead of glue along inside the rabbet. That's actually not a rabbet, it's not even a dado, it's a groove. And then we'll just slide that on the plywood and nail it on. And because I want to trim these later, this can be flush with the plywood. It can be slightly shy, like very slightly shy, but it can't be proud, because the plywood needs to reference the table saw fence when I trim it. Now, one difference here is with the other joinery, I can lay my nailer right on the table to nail that. Well, with this one, I have to hold it up a little bit, and it's a guessing game. As to where that is. And most of that worked okay. There was you can't see that. There was just a little, the nail just kind of poked through there a little bit. But I'll put on the other one and then we'll deal with that. I don't remember. I saw a picture of a cover that was built with this type of joinery. I don't remember where that was, so if anybody knows, let me know. can deal with my nails that came out. That one. That one didn't come right through, but it's sticking up there, and my next piece has to go flush, so I'm just gonna get a punch, push it down. This one is sticking up. I can't find my side cutter, so I have a tin snip here. Snip it off and then pound it down. All right, so this one now. If there's a bad end on one of these, then I'll put that out, because these are a 1/4 of an inch longer than they need to be, which isn't tons. So glue that, but I also glue this face, right? And then we get messy, spread that around. Looks like I put a bit too much glue on that. I have to get a feel for that as the project goes, how much glue to spread out in there. You know, a little bit of squeeze out is nice. You can see the joint is full, but too much is just a waste of glue. Okay, set that in there nicely. I want to push it this way toward the joint. It's just ever so slightly shy of the plywood, which is what I want. Now push this one in as well. Never sure how many nails to put in and how close to put them. Okay. Now, I have always gone the extra step and screwed that top cleat to the plywood. Mostly to clamp it, because there's no way for me to clamp that, to pull that broad top cleat down onto the plywood. Inch and 1/4 screw, number 8. Okay, so these shims, boy, I made these 5/8. That's an 1/8 of an inch thicker than 1/2 inch, which I normally use, and they're remarkably thick. I can glue the whole thing except that side. I can't really locate where the glue line should go. But once I get the shims on, then I'll be able to see it. A little bit on the side, a little bit on the bottom. Once this glue takes hold of that wood, there is nothing going to make it break free. Boy, it's really good glue. Now I'm going with a 1-inch narrow crown staple. That's the little narrow one. That's a 3/4. That's 1 inch there. Again, it can't be proud. It can be flush. And again, staples are clamps. Once the glue is set, the staples don't need to be there. The glue is way, way stronger than, it's not only way stronger than the staples, it's way stronger than the wood. Couple of short shims here. Always pick the best ones. A little bit of glue in these corners to glue the short shim to the long shim. Like that. Like that. Nice and tight. Very nice. Okay. A little bit of glue on the end of those, and then I can approximate a glue line between those, which looks like I missed. No big deal. A little waste of glue, but it's not going to hurt anything. And that is complete. I want to make sure there's no squeeze out here. This little bit of glue is, a little bead of glue is okay because it actually seals it up. Moisture and, airflow and whatnot. The other thing that I like to check when I'm done is there's going to be squeeze out here where I screwed the top cleat on, and I don't want that dripping. I stack these up when I'm done, and I don't want the glue to drip and glue them together. Well, that's number 2. Those are some big covers. They're quite a bit bigger than the others. I mean, they're really big now because they're 24 inches wide. But so that's what I'm going to be doing here today and tomorrow. What is this, Tuesday? So Wednesday, my goal Wednesday is to finish assembly. And then on Thursday, I can trim all of the covers through the table saw, and also then get out my little router and do my roundovers. I've decided not to drill the feed holes yet because that can work for me this winter. I don't need to use those feed holes until I'm using my polystyrene boxes, which I'm not using my polystyrene boxes yet. So what I'm anticipating in the spring, when I need to feed syrup to the bees, the insulated part of the cover will come off. And so at that point, I can use my standard migratory cover that already has a feed hole in it, because they're wooden boxes right now. I have to, actually make allowance to use my insulated covers on the wooden boxes. So when I get them back from the dipper, hopefully I'm going dipper on Friday, and get them back, I'm going to have to cut some sort of shims to put on the bottom side of those boxes, so that they'll sit on my smaller wooden boxes. You'll see when that time comes, but it'll be the next week's video before you actually see that. All right, I'm going to leave you with that for now and get back to building covers. Thanks for watching. It's Wednesday, October 29, 2025. Now this is kind of the end of my day, so I'm a little bit tired. Assembly, I do enjoy something about an assembly day. It's a bit tedious, but there's something about assembly day I really like. And the fact that I've got a big screen in my shop, and I'll put on a YouTube video, or I'll put on a playlist so they play one after the other. I was just watching Corey Stevens talk about why some cell builders suck. That's exactly what the video is called. He's a really good teacher, and he's a really intelligent guy. So I appreciate Corey. I got to know him a little bit when he was up here. It was a year and a half ago or so. He's an absolute riot. So anyway, yesterday I got along quite well. I built 10 of my covers. So again, I'm building 32. So I had 12 to go, and there's 12 here. Now, glue is wet on those, so they've got to set. But I can go ahead to the next step here and trim the 10 that I have. And I've just trimmed the first side of this. And I want to bring this around closer to you so you can see how nice this finish is. I did make it wide enough so I can trim both sides, but I've only trimmed this side so far. A little bit of tear out because I'm actually using a rip blade, which I shouldn't be. But that really trues up everything really nicely. And the only thing to do yet is to run a round over on all of the edges. And boy, when you run that round over, it's so much nicer to hang on to with your hand. So yeah, it really does a nice job. In order to do this, I make my cover 1/4 of an inch too wide. And that's so that I can take 1/8 off of one side and 1/8 off the other. And so now my fence is set so that I can I can run this, and it'll end up being 1/8 of an inch too big. You heard me say when I was assembling that it's the plywood that needs to protrude. So all the pieces are mostly flush, but they are all a little shy. I can go flush, but in this case, they're all a little shy. I do go for a little shy. So now I know exactly how wide that needs to be, and then I'll run all these through. That big piece of waste plywood comes off. Sometimes some of the ends of the cleats and whatnot will come off. And then I can reset and run them all back again. Trim this side. So let's do a few of those. And I have to run my saw at max height for this. That's 3 inches high, because this is 2 and, well, let's get the tape measure out. This is almost 3 inches. That's 2 3/4 high. When I build for that other customer who wants an extra 1/4, boy, that taxes the height of my saw. And I had a viewer a year or two ago. I was complaining that when I run the piece through and it exits the far side, that I get a little tear out on this corner. So the viewer said, well, why don't you start by running it through this way just a little, back it out, flip it over, and then you'll be cutting inward with each side. The chink in the armor is there's always this little surface, and there's really no way around that. Well, there's this little surface under here too, but at least it's not on the outside. Okay, so let's try a few of those. you have to admit, that's a nice finish. Really showcases that joinery too. I'm pretty happy with that joinery. You have to be careful to make sure to get it to fit together perfectly and make sure there's no gaps. And one of the difficulties is this plywood is inconsistent. So there is a gap in some of the places where the plywood is thinner and this end cleat goes on. There's a little gap there. But what are you going to do? Never buy that plywood again. That's what I'm going to do. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, trim these 22 and then run the router over all 32, and then they're done. I will also put my little brand on them, and I should put my brand on the little boxes too. I've started to do that for customer orders, so why shouldn't I do that for my own? But that's it for today. I remembered who gave me the advice about turning the project over, and that was Tom Bacon. He has a YouTube channel, and he's a pretty busy guy, so he's not doing as much YouTube these days, but he's got some pretty interesting stuff. He actually takes his bee box building and his equipment building right from the tree to the finished product, and he sells it too. So he's got a sawmill and everything there. Pretty interesting. He's a younger fellow than I am. I don't think I could manage a sawmill. It would probably do me in physically. This is enough. To be honest, standing here assembling for hours on end really takes a toll on my everything, knees, hips, back, everything. So it's just the fact that I'm not moving. I'm not moving around and keep my joints limbered up. So anyway, I'll stop complaining, and I'll bring you back tomorrow when I finish these off. Thanks for watching. It's Thursday, October 30, 2025. And I got to finish this project today because I have to hit the key in the morning and get to the dipper. So I've worked ahead and finished the trimming this morning. Things went well with the trimming. Everything is trimmed up nice and whatnot, except there's I don't know if you can see, there's a screw. Well, it's half a screw now. I cut right through it. And the problem with that is that I blew my blade brake. That's what a saw stop blade brake looks like after it goes off. It kicks in and it's a destructive thing. It destroys the brake and quite often damages the blade. I haven't bothered to pull it off quite often. They're difficult to get off of there. It's all junk anyway. Now these are really cheap blades. I think I bought them for $10 or $15. So I'm not too worried about that. However, I just ordered that and free shipping. It was $165, all in, tax and everything. So that was kind of a dumb mistake, but that's what happens. It's kind of the price you pay for the safety feature of the saw stop. It can activate if you touch very wet wood, or, you know, I've cut through a lot of screws and nails with the brake active and has not set off the brake. But this time I wasn't so lucky. And like I say, that's a $165 screw. I can still use my saw, but it's much more difficult because I have a spare cartridge, but it's a demo cartridge. And it only runs for, I think it only runs for about 2 minutes and then shuts off. So it's constantly shutting off, resetting, and starting the saw again over and over. So anyway, I'm done cutting here today, and I have to cut the polystyrene. When I get that, I'll be bringing that home on Friday, and so I'll be running that through the saw. And again, it's going to be inconvenient to reset the saw every time, but it is what it is. They're bringing that cartridge. I don't know when. It should be mid to late next week, I guess. But I'll be busy in the bee yard prepping these hives. I won't be in the wood shop next week, I'm sure. All right. So second to last step is take my cover and my little Bosch palm router. You can't see from that distance, but there's a little cove roundover bit in here, and the router's not plugged in, so I dare touch it. And it looks like it's still set up from last time I used it. I don't use this for a lot of different things, so I can just leave it set up with that bit normally. This is a operation where you definitely want to wear eye protection and ear protection because this thing's loud. I'm just admiring my $165 screw. That'll be a constant reminder to me to not be so stupid. All right. So basically I want to touch every surface. I want to touch this edge, all the way around these tops, this edge, both sides. The only part that I don't route is the top of the feed hole, but I haven't cut feed hole yet. I won't need feed holes until probably almost a year if I get my polystyrenes in use this summer. Then I'll use the feed holes to feed next fall. All right, enough talk. Let's get to this. Now, I can't tell you how that changes this project. Just when you touch it, when you pick it up, it makes it feel lighter because it's not as harsh on your hands when you pick it up. Now, I don't work in gloves. I hardly ever work in gloves, particularly in the bee yard. So I noticed that kind of thing. And even the look of it, it looks lighter. It looks nicer. There is one practicality. Well, there's two areas that are practical, and it's the reason I started doing this. And the two areas are this bottom lip here and this top corner here. Now the bottom lip, to round that off, if it's tight on the box at all when you put it on the box, that helps it slide over the corner. And then in similar fashion, this roundover, when you're stacking pallets on top of these covers, when you put them in the barn or transport them, that little roundover helps that runner on the pallet slide past that. I also chamfer the runner, so between the chamfer and this roundover, it really helps things go into place. All right, no more talk. I'm just going to do this. Thanks for watching. A little branding iron works really nicely. So I've got only half the boxes in here. I need to get the other half I had stored in the truck. This project is coming to an end. I'll have to do the polystyrene yet. And of course drive to the dipper, then do the polystyrene. And then they'll be ready to use, I think, which will be really nice because I need to prep my bees for winter. I'll be putting on winter wraps in early November this year, which, you know, if the forecast holds, that's okay. It's not going to be that cold. But I got to get it done. I have to collect my pails and hopefully wash them still. So, yeah. So you want to know where that little brand came from? There's lots of places you can buy those. I bought that years ago from a place called Brand New online. I think they're in California or something. I don't recall what it costs, but you can get electrically heated ones if you're doing a lot of branding. It's just a lot more money. I'll show you closer what that brand looks like. That's just a little kind of a company name that I came up with a few years ago when I thought I was going to do woodworking, and then I got into bees. So now I can do both. All right. This is a long video, so I'm going to call it a video now, and I won't likely update it on Friday because I'll go to the dipper, pick up my polystyrene on the way back, and then likely do some of that work Friday. But, you know, I could update, perhaps. All right. Thanks for watching this long video. Take care and have fun.